The Secrets of the Small Shafts of the Great Pyramid. 4 Underbar Whereabouts of the Dixon Relics Part 1. Those by Wayman Dixon and Dr. The relics found by James Andrew Sandilands Grant in 1872 were brought to England by John Dixon, Wayman's older brother, in the same year. From there he sent them by post to Professor P.R.C. Smith, who examined them and then sent them back to John Dixon. Dixon tried to sell them to the British Museum, which was not interested in purchasing them at the time. The objects remained in the possession of the Dixon family for 100 years. Elizabeth Porteous, John Dixon's granddaughter, recalled after visiting the Tutankhamun exhibition in 1972 that she had inherited Egyptian relics contained in a cigar box from her late father 2 years earlier. She then offered these as a gift to the British Museum, where they were recorded by Ian Shaw, but ended up in storage and then forgotten. When Robert Bovell investigated the whereabouts of the objects in 1993, he also used the notes, diaries and letters of Professor P.R.C. Smith, which are in the library of the Royal Observatory in Edinburgh, to search for clues. Bovell then published an article in the British magazine, The Independent, on December 6, 1993, in the hope that someone would come forward who could say something about the whereabouts of the Dixon relics. Ian Shaw, who was registering the objects at the time, read the article and informed Dr. that is S. Edwards, the former curator of the Egyptian collection at the British Museum, who in turn informed the curator in charge at the time, Vivian Davis. A search was then organized at the British Museum and the stone ball and hook were found in the second week of December 1993. Unfortunately, there was no trace of the third find, the broken piece of wood. A short time later, the Egyptian Ministry of Antiquities commissioned the British Museum to have the hook chemically analyzed. The result was as described, with a high degree of probability of ancient origin. Bovell continued to research the missing piece of wood and received a tip that it was in the Marischal Museum in Aberdeen. There was already a collection of over 2,300 objects from Dr. James Grant Bay. One of the daughters of James Grant and his second wife, Florence Sabina Grant née Gibson, Elsie Frances Morris, the wife of Gordon Morris, appears as the donor of the object Abdua 24358 with the name Stonemason's Rule Fragment Wood, which was acquired by the museum on November 26, 1946. The curator of this museum had received a letter from Elsie Frances Morris in 1946 in which she offered the museum 9 Egyptian objects from the legacy of her recently deceased mother, as a gift for the existing Grant collection. Among them was the said piece of wood from the north shaft of the Queen's Chamber. From a letter from Dixon to Smith dated November 23, 1872, we know that the wooden rule was packaged in a glass container along with the stone ball and hook in a wooden cigar box. However, the glass container containing the piece of wood must have been removed from the cigar box at some point and stored separately, otherwise it would have been registered by Ian Shaw for the British Museum. In 2001, the missing wooden rule appeared in an inventory list of the Marischal Museum in Aberdeen under the object number Abdua 24358, but could not be found because the museum was in the process of moving at the time. The comment on the object reads, "Left in ventilating shaft of the Great Pyramid of Chops, Queen's Chamber." Letter dated 18th of August 46 from donor, E.F. Morris, prior to donation. Stonemason's rule left in ventilation shaft of Great Pyramid of Chops 400 BC, in the Queen's Chamber and discovered by Dr. Grant Bay and Wayman Dixon at 1886 approx. This rule fell to fragments on being exposed to the air. Note in Old Museum Catalogue, discovered by the late Dr. Grant Bay and Mr. Wayman Dixon in 1872. As far as the data on the Aberdeen Museum website is concerned, there are some errors compared to the original information. Here is the text from the letter from Miss E.F. Morris, dated June 18, not August, 1946, describing 9 objects that she offered as gifts to the museum. The wooden strip is listed under number 2. Stonemason's rule, left in ventilation shaft of Great Pyramid of Chops 400 BC in Queen's Chamber and discovered by Dr. Grant Bay and Wayman Dixon at 1872 approx. This rule fell to fragments on being exposed to the air. The museum website lists the acquisition date as November 26, 1946. The date of manufacture of the object is incorrectly stated to be 4000 BC. Called. What is also interesting is the reference to the disintegration of the measure into fragments through exposure to air. The piece of wood has always been exposed to air, including in the Queen's chamber shaft, because although it was closed on both sides, there was still air inside. This explanation was probably just a reason for the disintegration into fragments, which meant that the entire scale could not be recovered. In late 2019, Egyptian curatorial assistant Abir Iladani conducted a review of the objects held in the Asia collection of the Marischal Museum at the University of Aberdeen. While cleaning up there, she found a small cigarette box with the Egyptian flag on the lid, which she immediately recognized as Egyptian. By the way, she only examined the little box because, as she herself said, it reminded her of home. So this was a happy coincidence. On the lid was the old catalogue number, 16374, which upon inspection turned out to be the long-missing Wayman-Dixon box, containing the wooden fragments from the northern Queen's chamber shaft of the Pyramid of Chops. The